What if your brain ran like it was on turbo without the crash? Imagine a supplement that enhances your brain like never before. Meet the natural way to unlock clarity, focus, and energy. Zero in with Looming. Need balance and resilience? That's Dawnlight. Want energy and endurance? That's Radiance, Cordyceps mushroom extract. Designed to support natural vitality, mental clarity, and everyday performance. Natural, vital, powerful. Your brain at full potential. Looming, Dawnlight, Radiance. Because life's too short for slow mode. Get yours now at monkeywerx.com.
All right. Hey, welcome, folks. This is going to be your SITREP. It's 8/19/2025. Coming to you live here from the Monkey Lounge in the great state of Texas. And so today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We've had eyes on it for over a month now, maybe a little longer than that. And just we're going to talk about what's going on with the oil tanker traffic around the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, 20% of the world's oil passes through this, and I'm seeing them stack up, and nobody's talking about it. So this we're going to look at today in a little more detail. And then, of course, we will be looking at the skies, what's going on with our military around the world, and the latest in terms of just news that as it relates to the oil stuff. Definitely something we need to be paying attention to, because that one right there punches everybody on the planet right in the wallet. All right. So let's get into the deets. We'll start out over here in Skyglass. As always, as you can see, top down, we're looking at what's up in the U.S. We're sitting around 239 mil aircraft only. And then, of course, we're going to peel this back into the layers. You see the yellow circles. You see these folks getting together, doing a little dance. And yeah, I know some of you guys just went Casey and the Sunshine Band on me, didn't you? All right. And then, of course, we're going to look at the age 60s. So let's go ahead and get into the 60s right now and take a look at how many are up. Now, this part right here, more than likely, is training. This part, not so much. Okay. So, and then out here in Florida as well. But this is going to be your 60s, 47 of those currently up as we speak. And then take a look at the air refuelers that are currently up as well. KC-135s, I've got 20, showing 17 on the screen, plus another 10 767 Pegasus, and 27. So we're only 2 above our baseline of 25. And as you can see, very concentrated up here, kind of center of the U.S. up to the northeast. All right. Now, the other interesting things. Let's get into the 47s. That's going to be your Chinooks. And this one's slightly elevated, about 10, 8, 6 to 8 is kind of our normal baseline for those. And again, you can see up here in the northeast. And then we drop down. Let's take a look at the other things that catch my eye. We've got the drones up. There are 2 of those. You can see one right up here at the Canadian border. The other one right here, low altitude, 225 feet. And that one, let's see, it's near, it's 28 miles south-southwest of Woodlake, Virginia. Now, take us to the big boys. That's going to be the Q4 drones, right? These are the ones that fly high altitude, and we'll see where these are located. One is going to be Overlord, and of course, that is staring right at all of this stuff that's happening around here, probably those oil tankers that we've been talking about. Somebody's obviously concerned. It's a U.S. military asset that is over the area. And then you can see this one too. Let's see if I can get it to give me the visibility, right? And it's just kind of near Malta. And let's see, we'll do some traces, see where this one has been. And as you can see, it's doing a little bit of dancing right there as well. Yeah, it's looking very closely at the Middle East. So it's eyes on everything from probably down here at the Suez Canal all the way north up towards Syria. We've got a lot of stuff happening out here. We're not going to get into that detail today. We'll probably talk about it in the near term, but that's what's going on with our Q4s. And let me see if there's anything else on here that I see. We've got one E6 up. That's going to be over the U.S. more than likely. I'll take us to that real fast. Yeah, it's just getting airborne. Then one R135. That one's over the UK. In fact, let me just, that's Goose 51 is the call sign for that. In fact, let's just go ahead and jump over to our watch list. Now, you're going to notice we have this, I don't know, it's a soiree going on with these Habal Intel balloons, all close together, right over the heart of the U.S. We've got some low altitude ones tied to border protection down at the southern end. And it looks like a Navy P-8 there over the southeast. And then that little low altitude drone near Canada. And then this one near Anchorage. All right. Now, we saw that one deploy. That had to do when just before Trump and Putin and those guys are up there. But they're obviously still hanging out in the area. And then you can see that's the R135 that is currently airborne. Just it's about 11,000 feet or so, just leaving England. So, okay, now let's talk Intel birds for a minute. We're going to start out over the Middle East. This one I find interesting because notice it's a little further south towards Egypt. Normally we see them really, really close to Gaza. It's not there today. It's actually looking more than likely at stuff going through the Suez Canal. Obviously a little worried. Now, why is that important? Well, let's say just for a second, you may remember that the last time we got together on our SITREP, I showed you there was an R135 Constant Phoenix, which is a nuke sniffer that was also loitering right there around the Suez Canal near Egypt. And with the prevailing winds, they were clearly working on some type of intel and worried about something either within the Mediterranean, within Libya, or within Egypt, maybe transient through the Suez that would be nuclear related. Okay, so that's why that's important. And we continue on. You could see a little bit of work there out over the Black Sea. Again, this is intel gathering. Remember, you've got that little pass that goes through Istanbul. If you shut that down, there is no oil flowing into Russia at all. All right, around Kaliningrad, the normal stuff. And then over the United States, this is the last 5 days. Seems to be a pattern here, folks. They are clearly looking at everything from California to Nevada into the mountains. That right there is a little man in the middle circle. Looks to be right over Atlanta. So that's where they become the cell tower in the sky. You're in Atlanta, you don't even realize it, but your phone's not connecting to a cell tower, it's connecting to that airplane. And then you can see up there to our northern Canadian border. Right, so they're clearly worried about something happening up there near Canada. And then a little broken trace, it looks like, out over the danger box areas, all right? Okay, now let's look at drones. You can see pretty active around Japan. China's a little active there as well. Go down to Australia, and I'm not seeing really anything down under. We get over to the Middle East. And again, just like I showed you with the Overlord, clearly very interested in what's going on water-wise, both sides of that little point there around the strait. And then you can see some activity going out across the Mediterranean. That's a high-altitude Q4 drone. And then there's some little low-altitude stuff, probably looking at ship traffic and things north of Libya, south of Greece. Okay. And then you get over to the U.S., and it's, Southern California down towards the border into, it looks to be New Mexico, probably looking closely at the highway system there in Arizona. Down in Dothan, Alabama, I see some little blips there in Mexico. And then we got this weird one that heads down to South America and back, just kind of like a point. I don't really know why it's doing that. All right. As you can see, it came up from the U.S., then right there at the Canadian border, that's a Q9, right? And then over this area, I got just a little blip right around Anchorage. So it looks like they had some drone activity there when Trump was up in that neck of the woods. All right. Now, let's take a look at the sub-hunters. Now, interesting thing here, we'll start out in the Middle East. I've got really nothing. You'd think around the Red Sea, you'd think around the Persian Gulf, you'd see some activity, but we've got nothing. Notice that one rolls out from around Malta, gets out over the Baltic Sea, on the very north end of the UK there. And then this one, I don't really know when you see them in the heart of the U.S., and they are, I mean, they do have ground penetrating radar, so maybe they're doing something there. In and out of SeaTac, more than likely. Then down south into those danger box areas, and then off the coast of Florida. Okay, that's going to be your sub hunters. Now, these are your R135s. Okay, this one, first and foremost, is going to be, let me just make sure, signal intelligence. As you can see, something rolled into, let me just chime on that 1 second. Let me back this up. You're going to notice there's something that rolls into Bahrain. And then it looks like something is, actually, I'll show you the Bahrain roll. That was not on the screen. This one, you'll notice southern border, clearly looking at the cartels, but little blips up here near where Trump and Putin were. Now, look at this. This is the nuke sniffer. Now, this is the one rolls into Bahrain, as you can see. Now, this, again, this is a nuclear tracking asset, right? It's a sniffer. And you can see it coming out of the UK into Bahrain. We saw it over the Mediterranean last time we got together. And then notice this, checking it out around the mountains, etc. Clearly, they're doing that for a reason. All right. Now, speaking of looking for nukes, let's get into the AWACS side. And you're going to notice that we have a little bit of activity that just disappears as it heads into the sandbox there. More than likely around that same area. They worried about something. I'm telling you, this is, you don't see the AWACS U.S. asset rolling into those areas very, very often, okay? Now, you'll notice here, man-in-the-middle circles, right? Again, they are doing signal intelligence more than likely when they do these tight patterns like this. Listening in, trying to figure out what's going on. Right, gathering cell traffic data, radar data. If there's nukes on the move in Belarus, they're listening. And then down here to Cuba. Remember, the Chinese are setting up a SIGINTEL platform themselves down there in Havana. So that is more than likely what we are doing. We're flying up close to that, getting eyes on it to see and make sure we don't have another Cuban Missile Crisis on our hands, right? Okay, now let's get into the deets of what is going on out there. And we'll start out over here, the marine traffic. So I'm going to hit refresh. And this is an area I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about. Ever since things popped off around June, traffic in this area from an oil tanker perspective has been stagnant. From what I'm gathering, only about 50% are making it around. What's happening is these oil tankers, and you're talking millions of gallons of oil that are just parked. These guys aren't going in to pick up, they're not delivering. They're picking up and coming back. So these oil tankers are sitting more than likely empty, right? Same with these, okay? And then you back up a little bit and you can see there is absolutely a pattern. There's very little coming through. Now the green are going to be cargo ships. Red are going to be oil tankers. So when you start to see them sitting like this, these are more than likely full. Okay, same thing with this in here in the port, all right? But they come out, they basically park, and they're not making the rounds. The reason they're not is because it is too dangerous. So it costs them a lot from an insurance perspective, and I mean a lot. I think they were saying the fees were something like $60,000 for them to basically be able to pass through this. Otherwise, it's uninsured, and they don't want to risk it. Now, we'll go back and look at a little bit of history of when this kind of stuff has happened in the past. In fact, let me take you over here because these are trends, and they're not that far back. I mean, you go into maybe the 80s where we start to see this kind of thing happen. So you had the tanker war, 1980, 1988, right? And it had an effect on prices. Oil prices were already high because of the Iran-Iraq war. In the 80s, prices jumped to around to $35 to $40 per barrel. That's equivalent of about 120 plus today. Now, tanker attacks kept prices volatile, all right? But by the mid-80s, Saudi and others pumped more oil to basically stabilize the market, and prices actually fell back into the teens in 86 despite the war. So that is one. Okay, we'll keep going. You get into 87 to 88. Operation Ernest, right? This was another thing that affected prices. Prices rose modestly during the worst of the mining and escort era. Basically, about $18 to $22 a barrel they went up, all right? U.S. Navy presence reassured markets, so they basically had to pass through that strait with escorts. That's pretty expensive, okay? Because those ships don't run on hope, okay? And then look at this. Iran threatened to close back in 2011, 2012, that they were going to close the strait. Now, they're threatening that again. In fact, they've already talked about it. They've presented it to their, government, and it has been approved, but they haven't actually done it. There's speculation that that's just a bunch of, rhetoric. They're not really going to do that. If they do, though, take a look at this. Brent crude surged above $125 per barrel in 2012 when Iran threatened, and I'll tell you that, threatened to block the strait in response to sanctions. What's going on right now? All right. The fear alone drove a spike, even though no closure happened. By mid-2012, Saudi Arabia opened the taps and prices fell back down. So that was back into the 90s in terms of $90 a barrel. Interesting thing is, notice twice now, Saudi has basically bailed everything out and kept things going. And then here in 2019, tanker seizures and mine attacks. So they started mining the area. You've heard me mention the fact that they were threatening to do that. And there were talks that they were actually doing some of that, but nothing confirmed. Now, effect on the prices, it jumped 4 to 6% in a single day after the Stena Impero seizure and the Limpet mine attacks. So that was June and July of 2019. But Brent hit $70, $75 range. But again, it didn't sustain. By fall 2019, it was back down around the 60s. Now, the Brent oil is really kind of, that's what we measure, all right? And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But take a look at this. You start looking at the spikes, and you can see this is historic oil spikes during the Strait of Hormuz disruption. So again, 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait. And these spikes that you see, those aren't per gallon prices for oil. That's the spike in addition to the per gallon. And so when you start getting up here in that one section where you had the threats in 2011, 2012, that was a huge hit. And what happens is it transitions to the pumps. So when you're watching all of this sit idle on both sides, nothing's moving. One, it tells you there's something going on there that we're not hearing about in the news. Okay, they're not publicizing it because they don't want to spark fears. Now, I will tell you, I've been watching what they call the black pools, and that doesn't mean oil. That is where offline trading happens. Okay. And the reason they're offline trading is because if people come in and they sell, like you got an Elon Musk that sells, a million shares of something, that if it was real time live in the marketplace, you'd see a massive sell-off probably take place. So to prevent that, these traders basically work behind the scenes in their own systems that are kind of offline, and they slowly phase that stuff in, not to cause market turmoil. So you watch that in advance, and when you start to see them making and hedging around all of this, then you know something's coming. Right now, there's nothing. Now, the alarming part to that is, let's get into some of the news here. It says shipping costs through the strait are rising, even as oil prices are dropping, right? And I'm going to show you, when we get into Dry Baltic Index, that, prices are kind of down low and they're stable. In fact, they're lower than they were in Flashbang's regime, okay? So they say, this goes into about what happens if Iran closes waterways. Well, I just showed you exactly what happens, right? There's a massive spike. Even them talking about shutting it down can cause turmoil in the market. That's what happened. So that is a big one. But they're saying, again, it's like $60,000 additional for these ship captains and these shipping companies that are handling the oil to pay for insurance to get around that. Now, the answer to that is you start putting military escorts coming through, but can you imagine the cost of fuel to take battleships or cruisers or whatever they need to go back and forth around that strait on a daily basis? and the amount of volume. Again, right now, you only have about 50% passing through. All right. And then here's the other issue. All right, you've got an issue, this incident that just happened June 17th. So this is about a month ago, but there was tankers on fire after colliding. So a huge fire developed following a collision of two tankers close to the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz. So big thing here is because of jamming. So you get over here to this side, and I'm going to just show you this. This is over on Flight Radar. They do have a map jamming capability. Believe it or not, I just found it because everybody else wants to charge you, $25 a month to see that data. And so you get into this. Take a look at the jamming going on here. What happens? It means there's a lot of spoofing, a lot of jamming. The ships aren't getting proper reads, and if they're cruising through and say they have autopilot on, and that autopilot is not having an accurate GPS location, then all of a sudden you start to run into issues where they collide, like what we saw there. And this is happening. This is live right now, the amount of jamming that's happening right here. So now you go, all right, well, who's behind this? Could it be the Iranians? Do they even have that capability? I don't know. But I will tell you who does have that capability: United States, China, Russia, Israel. Okay. Now, then you start to pull that thread a little bit and go, well, who would want to disrupt all of the oil, 20% of the world market, all right, to drive up prices, et cetera? You just kind of have to read the room here. Okay. So it says the streets of Tehran have become a confused maze for drivers amid widespread GPS disruption, still ongoing nearly 2 months after the 12-day war. It says for weeks they've been unable to even work because GPS stuff isn't working properly. So again, it's speculation here that Israel is basically jamming up the Iranians with their GPS stuff. All right. So let's move on. Now, take a look at what's going on here. You've got, if we just kind of look at the TFRs, you've got an exercise scheduled over Oman. You get out into this region, and it looks like there's a restricted airspace established. Now, that is pretty doggone close to where a lot of these ships are sitting. So now the other piece, too, is you'll notice that looks to be unmanned aircraft. So they are absolutely getting reads on the ships and everything that's parked out here. Same thing out here in the Persian Gulf. Again, unmanned aircraft scheduled. A lot of drone activity around here, right? Okay. Now, we'll get back into a little more of the oil piece, but again, very important because nobody's really talking about it. And my guess is that once the rubber meets the road, if indeed they don't get this stuff flowing, once it hits, because, everybody's got reserves, they're burning stuff down. But once it hits, it's going to be a shock, I think, like shock and awe from an oil perspective. It'll hit the markets fast. It'll hit the pumps fast. Going to be a big spike, and then they'll start trying to figure out how to mitigate it. Saudi's probably pumping extra oil. And that's a big indicator is when you start looking at the oil prices today, the fact that they're staying low is more than likely because somebody's trying to offset what is sitting out there. Okay. All right. U.S. deploys warships near Venezuela to combat drug threats. So they say drug threats. Let me tell you, you get north there over near Caracas, et cetera. There's a lot more than drug stuff going on. But 3 U.S. Aegis-guided missile destroyers will arrive off the coast of Venezuela in the next 36 hours. Now, let's read between the lines here. They say it's to counter drug threats. But, and then, of course, it talks about which ships they are down here. But take a look at this. Remember, the United States just put a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. All right. And so all of a sudden, we just happen to combat, drug cartels north of Venezuela with our ships. Not buying that for a minute. There's something afoot here, folks. But look at this. Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro says he's deploying 4.5 million militia members in response to the outlandish threats by the United States. So you got to read between the lines. The fact that we just parked, or we're parking, the U.S. Navy off the coast of Venezuela. We got a $50 million bounty for this particular guy. This could be very interesting and very telling of what is coming, all right? Now, remember, when you start talking about Venezuela, you start talking about Russia, very tight ties with Russia and China, all right? Speaking of Russia, when we talk about oil refineries, this continues happening. Russian military strikes Ukrainian oil refinery supplying Donbass forces. Precision weapons and drones hit energy facility, weapons depots, and a UAV workshop around, I guess, bases across 142 districts. But this was on August 19th. So it came out today. So this is pretty fresh. And again, you got two folks that are trying to get together to talk peace, and they still can't just stand down for a day. All right. But notice they're hitting refineries. When you hit a refinery, it takes forever to get them back online. This isn't something that happens overnight. Again, that will cause a spike in the cost of gasoline and heating oil for houses, okay? And then right back. Ukraine strikes key oil pipeline to EU, Hungary. All right. And now this is pretty crazy. The latest attack on Budapest's energy security, outrageous and unacceptable. And so, you know, Russian oil supply to Hungary has been halted after Ukraine targeted this same spot. I mean, it's just, you're hitting oil pipelines, you're hitting refineries. There's all kinds of this stuff happening. Now, let's go back a little bit. I want to show you something I found very interesting. So now you see Trump has been invited to Russia. Will he show up? Maybe. But let's take a look here. I want to just let you see the skies on what has been going on. Now, you look at U.S., right? This is going to be our command staff, okay? Coming heavy out of D.C. You see a couple things kind of headed westbound here. Don't know who that was. Could have been a VP. You see the sea of traffic headed up to Anchorage. All right. Again, that's bringing in all the command staff. So that's Trump headed up there to talk to Putin. And then you see a little something going down what looks to be towards the Central America, and some stuff going into the northern part of UK and into Stuttgart. Now, again, you see Trump's planes flying into Alaska. Now, let me show you, and that's the last 5 days. Now, let me show you the last 5 days of Russia. What do you see missing? I don't see Putin's flight. Now, I will tell you, it's in my watch list, and I track it when he flies. Why is Putin's plane not showing going into Russia? Right? And we know he went there. You can see him going into Tel Aviv, it looks like. You can see the normal type of traffic. It's kind of light for 5 days, honestly, for the Russians. But again, why is there no flight? Why would Putin hide his flight going into Alaska? I don't have an answer for you, but I do find it interesting because, like I said, I track his flight all over Russia all the time. He's in that mix of stuff that we do. I don't hone in on it directly, but it's just one of those things where you go, something's missing here. And I don't have an answer to that, but it is interesting. You can see the U.S. envoy head up there, but then you don't see anything from a Russian side. So, okay. Now, we were talking Brent oil, and just to show you, it right now is at $66 a barrel. Again, this is the stuff that's coming out of the Middle East. It goes around the world, and it's currently down. It's been a little volatile from time to time. On the 19th of June, just before things popped off, around the 20th of June, when things did pop off, it was at $77 a barrel. And back here, it was around $81 a barrel. Right now, it's kind of low. But again, that's probably because somebody is providing kind of the backfill for this, more than likely the Saudis, and nobody's even talking about it. But keep our eyes on that, because if indeed this continues on, it's just a matter of time before this thing starts to spike. And yes, that will be felt at the pumps. So, All right. Well, look, that's going to do it for our sit rep today. I hope you have a blessed rest of your Tuesday. We will see you on Thursday with the next round here looking at the skies. So that's it. You guys be safe. Keep that powder dry. We'll talk soon. God bless. Monkey out.